Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Late Night Learning. I'm your host, Dr. Anthony Palumba. Now today we're going to be continuing our lecture on media branding. And so media branding, as we were talking about earlier, really does involve the ways in which we look at brands and the ways in which we look at brand management. Now, obviously in this particular lecture, we looked at entertainment brands, and we're going to continue to do so. And so in the last lecture, we talked about ingredient branding, we talked about what it means to be a product versus a brand, and how important brand management is in the entertainment and media industries. We wrapped up last lecture looking at one of my studies that looked at how creatives can serve as a kind of ingredient branding and how they can predict who goes to the movie theater to see a particular movie starring a particular creative. In this particular lecture, we're going to be looking at different kinds of brand measures, different kinds of ways in which we can measure brand health. So let's get started. So brand equity is this notion of all brands are endowed with meaning. Now to the left of the slide, I have Disney World. In fact, I have two images from Disney World. I have a Disney Ferris wheel, and of course I have Walt Disney pointing the way to Mickey Mouse, which is in Disneyland. And so there's equity in both of these particular photos. Why? Because if we look at a generic theme park, and then if we look at Disney, conceptually, the difference between Disney and a generic theme park is brand equity. If we think of McDonald's, for instance, minus a mom and pop hamburger restaurant, that difference between McDonald's and a generic hamburger restaurant is brand equity. And so brand equity means brand value. It is the value that is added to the brand by the brand itself. And so all brand equity is derived from marketing effects uniquely attributable to a brand. So Disney has unique marketing effects that other entertainment brands do not. It has Mickey Mouse. It has Marvel. It has a lot of different ways to market itself that other competing media conglomerates like your Universal Studios, like your Viacom conglomerate do not have. And so brand equity is a really, really important measurement that a lot of market research firms will measure in surveys. When I was in industry and I was conducting studies for HBO and CNN, it was not uncommon to find questions surrounding brand equity, really trying to delve deep into how do consumers perceive this brand and how do they value it. Let's keep going. Brand awareness. It is difficult to figure out brand equity without having some sort of brand awareness. If I mention social media, it's likely two of these brands will come up in our discussion. Facebook to the left and Instagram to the right. And so Facebook and Instagram arguably have super high brand awareness because if people think of the category that these two social media firms are in, they'll be able to quickly list them. If they're asked, when you think of social media, what comes to mind? So brand awareness specifically can be broken down further into brand recognition and brand performance. And so the idea here, the conceptual piece here, is that we all have linkages in our mind. When we think of a brand, when we think of a branded service or a branded product, we have linkages in our mind. And so it may very well be that these linkages help us retain our own past experiences with the brand. So we might say to ourselves, yeah, Facebook, I accessed it on my phone the other day, or Instagram, I saw Starbucks posting about pumpkin spice lattes, and so I had a really good interaction with using the Instagram app. And so when we think of these particular instances, we begin to form associations in our mind. And so we all have brand nodes, so to speak, conceptually in our mind. And brands help us house previous experiences and memories. When I mention Disney, when I mention Apple, when I mention Amazon and Google, all of you are instantly thinking of things. And I don't need to tell you what to think about these companies. Between advertisements, marketing effects, and your own previous experiences, you've already culled out what Apple means to you, or what Starbucks means to you, or what Disney means to you. If we look back at the slide here, you can see that this is made up of two different kinds of measurements. So first, we need brand recognition. Do you recognize the F in Facebook, that white square with the blue F? That means that there is high brand recognition. Now, we take it for granted with Facebook and Instagram, but if I asked you what the Honda emblem was, or what the Chrysler emblem was, or what the Mercedes-Benz emblem was, some of you may not know that. And so with brand recognition, it's important that people can recognize the logo. Second, in order to have strong brand awareness, we can't just have good brand recognition, we also need good brand recall. Consumer ability to retrieve the brand from memory when given the product category, the needs fulfilled by the category, or a purchase or usage situation as a cue. And so here, when we think about brand recall, that goes back to, what do you think of when you think of social media? What do you think of if you have to post something? What do you think of if you want to create a social media group? What do you think of when you're thinking of all of these different elements here? And so when we're thinking about all of these particular elements, it's important that we think of brand recognition as well as brand recall. Let's go to the next slide. Disney consumer products. So I couldn't get enough of Disney. I had to insert a particular slide in here. And so Disney consumer products is a very, very interesting piece of media branding. Disney consumer products currently aren't doing as well as they should be doing, and this is a particular operations arm that Disney is working on as of this broadcast. But largely, Disney has relied on this for some 50, 60 years. The Walt Disney Company absolutely relies on television, movies, and other entertainment ventures to promote its own merchandise lines. Disney Toys, Fashion and Home, Disney Food, Health and Beauty, Disney Stationery. Those are some of the subcategories in Disney's CPG, or Consumer Product Goods. Now, Mickey Mouse was first licensed in 1929 on a children's writing tablet. And so Disney has been in the CPG industry for some 80 years. However, in the 1980s, believe it or not, Disney actually overbranded. They began branding diapers. They began branding any kind of product they could find. If we really think about it, do you really want Disney branded on diapers? Maybe not. And so Disney began kind of rolling back its branding in order to maintain its perceived equity, right? Getting back to maintaining its perceived value. Let's move along. So when we're trying to build brands, when we're trying to get to this point as an entertainment manager, there are a few things we can think about in order to trace and model brand growth and health. So for one, there's the brand positioning model. The idea here is how to build a foundation in the minds of consumers in the marketplace. And for instance, if we think of NBC, if you haven't been to the website lately, NBC's slogan is share the moment. Share the moment. It's trying to position itself as a communal place. It's trying to position itself as a way in which consumers can enjoy This Is Us, other kinds of shows, Superstore, and do it in a very communal way, kind of reintroducing this notion. We can then move on to the second model here, brand resonance model. So with brand resonance model, the idea here is how to take these competitive advantages and create active, loyal relationships with customers for brands. And so from brand positioning, we go to brand resonance. How do we make brands resonate with people? If I start talking about Snow White, The Little Mermaid, Aladdin, and all of these Disney sub-brands, if you will, these franchises that have been produced by Disney, Lion King also comes to mind, we begin to have our heartstrings pulled. We begin to realize and reconcile and reflect on the kinds of relationships we have with these brands. They resonate with us. They pull on our heartstrings. They make us feel certain emotions. These are competitive advantages that Disney has. And so with the Disney streaming service that is about to launch in a few months, it's crucial that Disney takes advantage of this. Finally, brand value chain looks at the value that has been created through the brand itself, and the financial impact of marketing and investments to create loyal customers and strong brands. You'll recall from our media finance lecture, we looked at earnings per share, we looked at price to earnings ratio, we looked at stockholder price and market capitalization. Those particular financial metrics are very important in brand value chain work because we're looking at the financial impact of maintaining a very strong brand. Let's move along. Now, not all brands in entertainment stay put. And so there are brands that will go through rebranding. Spike TV no longer exists. Spike TV was a channel under the Viacom parent brand that was targeted toward male adults. It has since been rebranded as the Paramount TV network. And so some entertainment brands do go through this. Now, getting back to this particular slide, Discovery Channel has gone through a rebranding of sorts here, as well as kind of a logo change as well. Initially, the Discovery Channel was launched with the motto, or slogan, "Explore Your World." But this didn't necessarily sell. And so in order to kind of get on the bandwagon behind reality programming and crime and forensics, it took a detour. And this actually happened to a lot of cable brands about 15 years ago. The Sci-Fi Channel at one point was showing cooking shows, the Sci-Fi Channel. And so sometimes channels do in fact deviate from their actual brand focus. Is this an issue? Yeah, it absolutely is. Because Discovery Channel is meant to inform, first and foremost. And with reality programming, it tends to be a little bit more geared toward entertainment than information. And so the channel wound up returning to its mission of producing high quality work that the company could be proud of, that was beneficial for people. Discovery has a portfolio of some 13 US channels that reach out to about 745 million audiences. And its 120 overseas channels in 180 countries reach about 969 million homes. Now, I mention this because any little brand adjustment, any little change to the brand focus is very, very, very impactful to the rest of the business. When you are changing and managing your own brand as an entertainment manager, it is crucial that you think about the changes and their implications. Let's move along. Brand mantras. And so I alluded to this earlier, but brand mantras are usually a short 3 to 5 word phrase that captures the irrefutable essence or spirit of the brand positioning, otherwise known as brand essence. I know it kind of sounds like a cologne or perfume, but brand essence is the root of the brand. What does FX make you feel? What does HGTV make you feel? Do you want to plant a tree? And so when we think about particular mantras, we're really interested in what is the brand trying to communicate to us? What is the brand trying to tell us? What does the brand want me to think about the brand? Never mind what it wants to tell me. How should I perceive the brand? When you have a slogan, you're kind of cutting through that, right? You might look at HBO and say, oh, HBO, it's high quality, it's dramatic, it has some really good dark comedies. HBO kind of cut through all of that and said, for one of its slogans, it's not television, it's HBO. So you could watch TV, you poor thing, or you could watch HBO, because HBO is different than television. It's either just television, the regular nonsense that we deal with, or it's HBO. It's more high quality, better quality, cinematic even. And so you can see through several networks here, at certain times, they will sometimes try to adopt a slogan. And I mentioned NBC currently has Share the Moment. The brand functions here is part of the brand mantra. And so the brand function should rely on the brand mantra. So if HBO is telling you it's not TV, it's HBO, then the function, which is described by the mantra, should be what the channel will give you. What's the nature of the product or service, or the types of experiences or benefits the brand provides. Those of us who have watched The Sopranos, Game of Thrones, other series, Big Little Lies on HBO, Barry, also on HBO, highly recommended. All of those programs are highly, highly cinematic and really well scripted. That's the function of HBO. The function of HBO is to be better than television, to give you more than what normal television gives you. And so some of these channels may have descriptive modifiers, which may clarify the nature. HBO does this. Or they may have emotional modifiers, providing ways in which the brand itself can help. Let's move along. How do you create or define a strong brand mantra? So there's the emotional modifier. If we're looking at Nike and we're looking at Disney here, Nike is authentic. Just do it. Just do it. Just go for it. Impossible is nothing. Descriptive modifier is athletic. The brand function is performance. If we look at Disney, Disney is fun. It's silly. After all, its mascot is a mouse. Descriptive modifier is family. And brand function is entertainment. So you can quickly see that when we isolate brands here and when we apply this model, we can really pull out a lot of different meaning and a lot of different meaning roots, if you will. What is the brand rooted in? And so from here, you can begin to devise particular advertisements and marketing campaigns and other kinds of communication that literally encapsulate fun, family, and entertainment for Disney, authentic, athletic, and performance for Nike. Let's move along. Brand performance. Couldn't help but cite Stranger Things somewhere here. Big, big fan of the show. Highly recommended if you have not seen it. And if you haven't seen it, don't tell anyone that you haven't seen it. You'll get an earful. Brand performance describes how well the product or service meets customers' more functional needs. How well does the brand rate on objective assessments of quality? If we look at Stranger Things as a brand, and I think we have to, because now we've had 3 seasons of it, and it is well known, if not just as well known as Netflix itself. And so Stranger Things advertises itself as a throwback to 1980s horror stories and horror TV shows and horror movies for that matter. What extent does Stranger Things satisfy this? To what extent does Stranger Things perform well for its audience? To what extent does the brand satisfy utilitarian, aesthetic, and economic customer needs and wants in the product or service category? When we think of brand performance, these are some of the elements that we have to think about. We're trying to assess how people believe it is performing. Let's move along. Brand imagery. With brand imagery, we're looking at another way brand meaning may be considered here. We may look at extrinsic properties of the product or service and how a brand attempts to meet customer psychological or social needs. Now, I have here The Legend of Zelda, which I grew up with, and I have the Nintendo Switch, which as a 32-year-old, I don't nearly play as much as I would have if I were 10 years old. But nevertheless, these two particular brands speak to people, and there is certain imagery that goes with it. Nintendo is whimsical, it's silly, it's fun, it's easy to play. The Legend of Zelda is something that many of us grew up with, and there are some 10 different installments of Zelda at this point, perhaps more. And so imagery really does refer to the more intangible aspects of the brand, and consumers can form imagery associations directly from their own experience. So we can look at The Legend of Zelda and say to ourselves, I kind of perceive it as adventurous if I'm putting brand traits on it, if I'm putting brand personality traits on it, if I'm thinking about the kind of user profiles who play Legend of Zelda. Is it nerds? Is it geeks? Is it sports fans? Who plays Legend of Zelda? Who plays Nintendo Switch? I can also think about the purchase and usage situations here. In what situation am I playing the Nintendo Switch? Probably online while I'm waiting to get a cup of coffee, or maybe in the airport before I fly out. What kind of personality do these particular brands have? These brands have a youthful, whimsical, adventurous side to both of them. I think you'll agree. And the history, heritage, and experiences within these two brands is profound, as The Legend of Zelda has been around for just about 30 years, and Nintendo's been around for about 35 years. As a console, as a company, Nintendo has been around for just about 120 years. Let's move along. And this brings us to brand personality. Through consumer experiences, brands may be perceived to have personality traits. And so brand personality traits illuminate how consumers ascribe personality traits to particular brands. Consumers are less willing to purchase a product from a nonprofit than from a profit company. Consumers found not-for-profits warmer but less competent. And so brand personality traits are very, very key because consumers will describe brands, whether it be a firm or be it a sub-brand, with personality traits. When we think of Nintendo, is it childish? Is it juvenile? Is it liberal? Is it conservative? Is it sexy? Is it ugly? What brand personality traits do we ascribe to these entertainment brands? And so, if we think about brand personality, it really is how consumers perceive these brands as people. That's ultimately the conceptual framework that underlies much of this. It's the assumption that we do, in fact, look at brands as people. That's different. It may mean that we also create relationships, and I've referred to this in the last lecture. When we think about brand relationship theory, we think about how consumers ascribe particular relationships to brands, being married to brands, being divorced from brands. Has a brand wronged you lately? We describe brands not only with personality traits, but we also have an inclination to describe having relationships with them as well. Let's move along. And the final slide I have for you, ladies and gentlemen, for this particular lecture is brand loyalty. Ultimately, when we think of media branding, this is where the buck stops. This is where everything comes to a head. This is where you want your brand to have the most success. Brand loyalty can be defined in two different ways. Repeat purchases, which is seen as behavioral, and the amount of share of category volume attributed to the brand. And so repeat purchases may mean that you repeatedly rent or purchase Harry Potter DVDs. But some scholars would argue that attitudinal loyalty is the way to operationalize or define brand loyalty. So rather than using behavioral loyalty, yeah, he always rents Harry Potter movies, we can use attitudinal loyalty instead. How does he feel about the brand? What does he think? Does he like it? Or does he just rent the DVDs because he has a sister who's 10 years old? Brand loyalty serves to segment audiences and help managers realize rate of loyalty and engagement with the brand. So when we think about brand loyalty then, what we're thinking about is how much loyalty there is between a particular consumer and the brand itself. We think about how these brands work to create loyalty and to reward customers for staying. And that last line is really what's critical in brand loyalty. How do we, as entertainment managers, reward customers who keep coming back? With Disney, there are theme park packages and other items that are given to loyal customers who regularly visit Disney parks and other hotels and other things that are related. With NBC or with Warner Brothers, a lot of these companies will work to have loyalty card programs for their stores or give 20% off if you purchase a lot of goods from their consumer product stores. And so when we think about brand loyalty, what we're really trying to harness is kind of a lifelong relationship, which gets into customer relationship management. This notion that we have someone at 18 years old, can we continue to have them at 60? If we think about where the video game industry has gone, for instance, we have a lot more adult games now. It is because adults are aging, but it's also because there are still adults in their 30s and 40s who want to play Grand Theft Auto. That's a really, really prominent brand in video game industry. And so rather than cater to younger adults, you can also do things that cater to older adults. There are older adults who look forward to having children so that they can watch Mickey Mouse and they can watch a lot of Disney movies and cartoons again. It's no accident that we're seeing live action versions of Disney cartoons that were made 25 years ago. If we think about it, I'm 32. 25 years ago, it was 1994, The Lion King had just come out. And so it's no secret that Beauty and the Beast has just come out, Lion King has just come out, Little Mermaid is upcoming. And with that 25-year gap, chances are people my age, maybe a little bit younger, maybe a little bit older, are starting to have children and would be very much inclined to watch these particular movies and updates and remakes and things like that. It's a reward for being loyal to the brand itself. So thinking about what we do with customers and how we keep them, because we don't want to lose them, is really one of the major linchpins of brand loyalty. Well, that's all the time we have on Late Night Learning. As always, keep laughing and keep learning.